Radio Zero.
It's Radio Zero with Rick and Rose for the week of September 2021.
We're on, you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, radiozero.us. We're live streaming on Facebook on the Radio Zero page, a Poster Children page, on Twitch at PCJCUSA, and on the Poster Children YouTube channel. And you can patronize us at patreon.com/Radio Zero.
The schmati that I'm wearing on my head is the exact same color as the door behind me. I'm going to have to take it off.
Well, not everyone is watching the live stream, but
Yeah, but I'm watching it, and it's freaking me out. It makes me think that part of my head is taken off.
Poster Children playing a show November 26th in Chicago at the Bottom Lounge with
go on. Sorry.
with Nonagon. Tickets available now. You can either go to posterchildren.com, click on the ticket link there, or go to what's the Bottom Lounge URL? I'm not sure. Probably Bottom Lounge, right? That is the only show we're playing anytime in the near future. Do not ask us to play somewhere else unless you have thousands
of dollars.
And
Austria. When is
weeks of
Salaryman tour in
time.
Europe?
Weeks of time for us to rehearse and travel to where you want us to go. Not to be negative.
How
it's
many
just
rehearsals are we having before this show? Is it like 5 or
4?
4? Only 4. And the rehearsals are about 5 hours long each, but at least 2.5 hours is like us talking. So like we play a song. Yeah, let's play Byron's song. We play the song, and then we have to stop. We have to have a whole like a 15-minute discussion about whatever, about current events, or somebody did something that like
something happened 20 years ago.
We have to discuss. We had to hash out. What were some of the discussions? I'm trying to remember. It was so much fun to practice. Oh, all right, Jeff Moe, Bottom Lounge, put a link in.
Thank you.
And Tim Bowers says, greetings from Lermos, Austria. And when is Salaryman touring Europe again? So
Again.
we need time to practice. Time and money, yeah. Offer us money, we'll
Not to put a too fine a point on it, but it's difficult.
It's hard for us to just play. So
Yeah.
anyway, yeah. So what were some of the discussions? So we started when we were practicing. We started with the newer stuff, which was fun. Usually we start with really old stuff and we work our way up to the new stuff, right? And this time we started with the newer stuff. So that was challenging because I actually have to think when I'm playing those songs. There's some songs I don't have to think at all. It's really weird. Like Byron's song, for example. I was just thinking that song's been going through my head like for like a week now. And I was thinking about, it sounds, the lyrics. I was thinking about the lyrics because I can't seem to get anything done.
Timeless.
Yeah, like as all of your songs are.
Evergreen.
But and then I was trying to figure out, because I was talking to our child about it, and I was trying to, why is it called Byron's song? Because Byron liked it. I can't.
He actually walked into the room while we were writing it.
So why was Byron?
He came to Champaign.
Came to Champaign to visit, and he was a Mormon.
That's right.
Right. He was the first Mormon that I ever met. That I knew that it was a Mormon. Now they're all over the place. I think that's really.
It is
cool.
true. It's true. The church did become much more prevalent. Yeah, it had an explosive growth.
Special back then. Like it was like, we know a Mormon, and you grew up with him. But anyway, all right. So he walked in during the song. That's why it's called Byron's song. It's not
Exactly.
like he was
It's
procrastinating
not
or anything.
not like I had lyrics when we were writing the song.
Right. Or a song title.
Right. I think we had talked to John Moore about this. It's kind of, if you write all the music before you write lyrics, then you wind up with lots of songs, that have names that don't necessarily have anything to do with the lyrics.
Right.
And also it's kind of a sellout move. You got a song called Baby Baby Baby, and then you title it Baby Baby Baby, and then you make the album name Baby Baby Baby. You're just pandering.
Tim, yeah. See, all right. So back to Byron's song, and then there's a whole bunch of things to discuss here. So I really like that because it's like octave E's, and I feel like it's probably one of the first songs that I ever wrote on the bass. Like one of the first things I ever wrote on a bass, and it's real fun to play. It's real bouncy. And it would have been, the parts that I write go along with the basses that I play. So it would have been written on the G3, that bass, right? So it would have been, that's why I was probably playing lots of like octave E's on the E string and stuff, and like octaves and stuff. That's probably why I play. But anyway, when we went to practice it, I just didn't have to think at all. It just came right out of my hand.
And not to
burst my bubble.
Yeah, but we actually didn't practice it as a full band.
I remember, yeah. And then I got
Just
really
you and
upset too, right?
You
yeah.
and I practiced it.
Yeah, because it's a song that
It's
Matt doesn't
ancient.
know yet.
Yeah.
Tim Bauer's asking about Jane. Was she really 13 when she joined AA? We have a friend who was 16 when they joined AA, I believe. But that is many, many, many years later.
Different Janes.
And yeah, her name wasn't Jane.
And she probably wasn't born yet.
My friend Jane.
So she would have been in high school in around 2000, the early 2000s. So she may have been born already, but the Jane in Where We Live is Drew Barrymore.
Oh, yeah, I forgot. Yeah.
I just saw, that came up in a news story or something.
About poster children?
No, was about Drew Barrymore going into rehab when she was 13. It was big news. It was big news then. Now it's not such big news.
Going into AA. Yeah. Who? Oh, man. Oh, it was the simulation. The how to talk to students simulation was like, and you can smell alcohol on him. Yeah, I was like, really? You could smell alcohol on a student? What do you do then? He's obviously depressed because he's drinking the alcohol.
I think that's a social norm. I don't have a problem with that. Like if a student comes to class
wasted on pot. What if they're reeking of pot?
They're boundaries. I think they're boundaries.
Well, you don't have a problem with them with.
So we should explain. We went through training, and it was this. It had avatars. It was kind of like a game, like 3D or not 3D. What would you call it? Yeah, like game.
It was a game simulation.
Yeah, animation. It
was gamified.
Yeah. So you were picking responses that this sort of 3D modeled professor should say to this 3D modeled student about their health. It's like, should you tell them to buck up and quit screwing around? Should you tell them that they should go to the counseling center? Should you ask them what's going on? And then would play out scenarios. It's kind of choose your own adventure type thing to learn how to talk to students.
Yeah. Did you do it perfectly? I did. Mine was perfect.
No, So again, it's similar to what someone else said. I'm not a proactive. I say, if it's fine, you can talk to me if something's going on, but the counseling center is they're experts. So
that's the correct answer, though. That's what you're supposed to say.
Well, no, I think this training was like, if you see a student and you start feeling like they're in trouble, you need to take them into your office and encourage them or walk them to the student counseling center, which is something I would never do. And and I probably still won't do, but I will definitely. I feel like I should be more proactive if a student seems to be struggling.
I have got these students in my class, and the ones that are and I'm like the easiest teacher in the world. You just sit and watch me, and you type along with me, and I'm teaching JavaScript, and you just type. Where I'm using the P5JS. It's like a graphical. It's not a graphical user interface, but it's like, you can type the word ellipse and 4 parameters after it, and it'll make an ellipse. So
let me just interrupt you there. Yeah. I'm the easiest teacher in the world. If you just pay attention,
you just pay attention.
Right. Those are all
right
things that you're not supposed to think and say, because that's
but so they just sit and they watch me for the 20 minutes that I talk. It's probably longer than that. But if your computer starts not working and you can't type in it, then you're screwed. You can, and I, for all, like I, since I'm the easiest and best teacher in the world, I would imagine, I'm like, so see, doesn't this make sense? Doesn't this switch statement make sense? Either it's going to be, we're switching on this variable, either it's going to be a 0, a 1, or a 2. So either you're going to do this code or this code or this code. And they're just typing. They're typing along. And then like, if I can you scroll up, please? I'm like, it's the same as the other cases. Just follow along with the pattern. Come on, guys. But there are like a couple of students whose computers, they crash during they crash. So they don't have a place to type this in. Now, when you and I were in college, we didn't have a computer in front of us when the fucking professor was teaching us computer programming, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was much harder. But they have their, so that kind of sucks in a way. But I don't, like, I feel so bad for these students, and then some of them cannot type very fast. And then some of them are, like, a bunch of them are from different countries, so this is the third language they're learning. JavaScript is the third. They're learning, English second, and English is probably not their second language. It's probably their fifth. So, no, capital P. Don't use a capital P in preload. It's a little p. It's terrible. But I feel terrible, because if your computer is not going to work for you, and if it crashes, then then I stop the whole class, and then people are like, then somebody starts sighing.
Well, I don't know. That seems like that's what teaching is teaching to the middle, and some students, are struggling either with comprehension or technical problems, and others are ahead, and you're just trying to keep everybody going. And unless you want a custom one-on-one learning experience and you can afford that, then you're going to have to deal with students are going to have to deal with being in classes with other students who aren't, they're going to have to deal with the tempo of the class.
Yeah, but the students whose computers are breaking are because the computer's 6 years old, and everybody else has a much newer, they're richer, they have a much newer computer. So that really sucks. So those students fall behind, and then they give up. And those are the students that you got to go walk to the counseling center, and it's I'm sure it's got to do with like money. Like, I'm sure like a lot of it has to do with just not having enough money to deal with things like.
Well, yeah. I mean, a computer's really expensive. College is really expensive. I've seen twice in the past month a chart of how the amount of money our university gets from the state has been cut by $20 million over 20 years, but it's also not adjusted for inflation, so it's basically like we're getting half of what we got 20 years ago, and so that means that our tuition goes up. It's not because we're all a bunch of fat cats making money off the state. It's because the state's it's 13% of our budget now, our income, and to deal with that, we've increased tuition. So I think almost everybody, I mean, we're looking at sending our kid to college, and it's going to be a huge financial burden. It's and we're not destitute, right? And it's going to be a huge financial burden for us. And so, yeah, it's all economic, and we made these choices. I don't want to pay. You don't want to pay you don't want your taxes going for state-supported education, so it costs more. And that also means if technology is important, then if you don't provide money for students to purchase the technology needed for their education, then students are going to have a problem coping and dealing and just surviving class because they don't have the technology they need, and they're financially strapped, and they might have to be working,
Yeah, that's another thing too.
and the expectation is that they're supposed to be, spending, as much as a full-time job in class and outside of class doing work, right? I just remembered when I was going through the curriculum stuff that a lot of these students are taking 5 classes a semester.
Wow. But also they're all freaking out too. They're all like crying and they're stressed
and then on top
and
of
everything
it,
like that. Yeah.
Top of it, we've had a huge global event that changed everything, and now we're supposed to go back to normal, but the world's not the same.
Yeah. Anyway.
And everyone's being told that, there's no future. It's terrifying.
Who's being told that?
I think that's just the general consensus, is that I think there's an overwhelming sense of doom.
Well, thanks for listening to Radio Zero.
Well, how to be optimistic.
Yeah.
Well, so the thing is we have to, what do we want? What do we want to happen? What future do we want? Do we want a future where no one can afford to go to college except for rich kids, and no one can afford to breathe except for rich kids, and no one has a job except for rich kids, or no one makes art except for rich kids? I mean, if that's the future we want, then we've got it. It's we're well on our way there. But if it's not, then we're going to have to restructure our society and start funneling money into helping more than just rich people.
Well, rich people are the ones who are not lazy, Rick. They pulled themselves up by their bootstraps.
What was it? I keep seeing these memes on Facebook. What was it like? If you were making $5,000, was it a day or a week? Starting in 1492, you still wouldn't have as much money as Jeff Bezos if you had lived from then until now. It's like those kind of things where it's not work anymore. There's no way that there's an equivalence between what a billionaire makes and how much work they do. There's just not enough time in the day to mean that someone who has billions of dollars has done 100 million more hours of work. It's not true. They're clever, or they've manipulated the
system.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're winning.
And the system is stacked in their favor.
Yeah.
And then they've manipulated and they've threaded the needle to become a billionaire.
That's the thing, like Donald Trump. That's the one thing I remember, like when it really hit me that Donald Trump was evil, because I don't like to think people are evil, but like he was kind of like, well, I figured out, I don't remember where it was in the presidency, but it was like, I figured out how to do this, so I win. I figured out how to do this illegal thing, so I should be allowed to do it, and fuck you all.
Yeah, gaming the system, right?
Yeah.
So that's something that even the most progressive of us, some of us, it's not based on your politics, it's a belief, or that well, they were clever enough to figure out how to game the system. Okay. But, and there's a certain amount of respect for that, right? Okay. Culturally. But I don't have a lot of respect for it.
So let's try to keep it positive. The rest of the stuff is going to be positive here. Yeah?
Sure. Go for it. Let's see if you can make it happen.
Have I, I want to know, have I been like really sad lately? Like, have I been complaining or anything? I want to know.
I don't know. You kind of, you complain.
Okay. Anthony Comport says, "Hey guys, I'm from Kalamazoo. Club Soda days. I miss you guys so much. Those were the best days of my life."
Kalamazoo was always a great show.
You know who You know who came to our show in Kalamazoo?
Oh my God! Do we have to say it again?
Came to our show in Kalamazoo. I'm trying to be an old person.
You don't have to try.
But the thing is, I forgot.
Weird Al
Yankovic. Yeah.
We can talk. It's the 30th anniversary of Nevermind. We can tell that old story again too.
The story about well, okay, so we were trying to decide whether or not to sign to a major label. We were not happy on Twin Tone because Rough Trade had gone out of business, so you couldn't get our record anywhere. We were touring all over the place, right? You couldn't find our record anywhere, so we were like, well, maybe we should sign to a major label. And who had just signed to a major label? Husker Du.
Well,
yeah.
No. The Husker Du thing was a couple years earlier, but Sonic
before.
Youth had signed to
Yeah.
DGC.
Yeah. And then like so we were trying to decide, and we owed more records to. We owed another one or two records.
Two more records to Twin Tone contractually. Yeah. Although Ween signed to Twin Tone around the same time and somehow got out of their contract and just got away scot-free. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah. But anyway, we needed to be bought out of our contract. If we wanted to leave Twin Tone, they needed something like $60,000 or $70,000. So we're like thinking about major labels, and we were getting ready to go on tour.
We had already talked, so we had already been out east a couple times and played shows. Had our first record out. Had been in Rolling Stone, like a little blurb, and so Sire Records, Columbia Records, and Atlantic Records we had already been in conversation with people at all three of those labels.
So anyway, so we decided when we went on tour, and I feel like I just told this story yesterday. We were listening to the new Nirvana record. Nirvana had just gotten signed to DGC, or had just signed to DGC, and we're like, well, let's see if that destroys Nirvana. Like, and they break up and nobody ever hears of them again, then we won't sign. But if Nirvana survives, with this new Nevermind record, then we'll consider signing.
Because Husker Du had gone through the whole process. The replacements had gone through the whole process. Although I think the replacements at the time were still, in theory, together, but it seemed like they were unraveling. Husker Du seemed like they unraveled once the major label thing happened. But if reading the history of Husker Du, it was much more complicated than just major label stuff, obviously. But
yeah.
And so just from externally, though, you'd say, okay, well, these great bands that had a long track history had unraveled because they went on to a major label. It was a death knell. But then, you look at Sonic Youth, and they seemed like it was okay, right? I think.
Yeah.
So would that have been Goo came out, and it didn't seem like it had destroyed them? Right. And so it was like, okay, well, let's see what happens with a smaller band that doesn't have a track record, had just had a record out, right? One record, which was Nirvana, right?
So we have video footage of us in the van, like listening to the, oh, this is a great song. And we went to Minneapolis, and then we went counterclockwise around the U.S. as we were wont to do. And
played South Dakota, right? North Dakota, South Dakota with Skin Yard.
Oh yeah. We got to Seattle, and we would be interviewed at college radio stations, right?
That makes me realize that. So yeah, like Jack Endino was in Skin Yard, so it was like and Barrett, right, the drummer, who was later in Screaming Trees. It's interesting, It's like that was like the grunge tour.
Yeah.
And so.
But we would be being interviewed and they'd say, hey, what do you want to listen to? What bands do you? And we'd be like, oh, play that new Nirvana record. Play Smells Like Teen Spirit. They'd be like, right on, yeah. And they'd play it, for us. And we'd be like, yeah, we love this song. And do you remember stopping at the warehouse, the Sub Pop warehouse? Because we had a Sub Pop single out. So we like knew Sub Pop people, right? And we stopped at the Sub Pop warehouse, and there was a dude printing up Nirvana shirts, and he was like,
what was he? I think we stayed with him, right? I'm trying to remember his name, because I think we stayed with him a couple times. He ran he was a T-shirt guy, so we went to the Sub Pop warehouse. But then he was printing. I think he had a different place where he's
Yeah.
printing T-shirts, right?
Yeah, and I remember him printing, and I was, I remember knowing about printing up T-shirts because I had, forced them to show me how to print up T-shirts here. I was helping print the Poster Children shirts, and so, and I remember him saying, "Yeah, I'm getting an awful lot of orders for these shirts. It's kind of weird."
Oh, he was completely overwhelmed. He
Yeah.
was like, "They're asking for a huge number of shirts. I don't know if it's just like a guy, just local T-shirt guy, right?" And all of a sudden,
They were the smiley face
yeah,
shirts.
the smiley, the classic Nirvana shirt, right? Yeah.
And I got like a broken one. I was like, "Can I have a misprint?" And he's like, "Sure." And I got a misprint one. This is all in my book, which is never going to come out, so you may as well just hear me talk it. Let's see, go on. So then we got, because you're better at recounting this story than
Well,
me.
yeah, and then we worked our way down the West Coast, right? So you play Seattle, and then we had a great show there. I remember they were playing If You CK on the. So that was the thing is that and I can't remember the name of the station. It's the famous Seattle station that was kind of the grunge station. Yeah, maybe yeah, and they they were playing If You CK, so we had a great show.
Where did
in
we play
Seattle.
in Seattle?
Was that Rock Candy? I don't know if it was Rock Candy. That may have been a later tour. I'm not the person to ask.
I remember being outside Rock Candy, and was it Mark Arm was out there?
That was the next time around.
They were really nice.
Oh yeah. Oh no, the Mudhoney guys are great.
Yeah.
That was later. That was after everything started getting really crazy, and Michael Azerrad was there, and then I remember there was a kid who he just moved to Seattle because it was the place to move to, and it was like, oh, okay, this town's dead, right? You
Once people start moving
you
to a
got
town.
the rock journey. Well, Michael was
Oh.
early. He wrote about us too. Like early, he was early, but it was you could see the scene already. It was like the map. You could see it mapped out, which was it was like it was getting so big, and then people just moving to the town because it's a scene as opposed to the people who were at the town building the scene. Right? It's that flip that happens where it becomes a hot spot. That was same thing with Athens, right? I think you going to Athens that like. Robin Hitchcock was there, and there was still, it was kind of like the aftermath.
Yeah.
Of, like when you would go to Athens in the early 90s. I feel like we went there before we did the full tour. I feel like we might have been out east and we played Athens, Georgia on one of our earliest tours.
It's possible, yeah.
And it already had that weirdness to it where it had exploded, and then it was still great to play there, had great clubs and had a great crowd, but it was also like, ooh, like there are people here who just moved here because it was the music town,
and the other people hate them.
Yeah, exactly. That whole
Like
dynamic.
You
right.
can never like those type of people.
But anyways, when we rolled into Seattle, it was right before everything exploded.
Yeah.
It was like.
So we're like maybe KCRW or something were being interviewed. One of them we were being interviewed like.
So once we got to San Francisco, that was where.
What
So
do
the
you-
video must have come out while probably that weekend. Probably the Nevermind, the It Smells Like Teen Spirit video probably came out the week we played Seattle and Portland and Eugene. We probably played Eugene, and then by the time we got to San Francisco.
What do you want to hear? I'll play that Nirvana song. No, we won't. What? Why don't you like it? You're kidding, right? It's broke. What do you mean it's broken?
It's on commercial radio.
Yeah.
We don't play it anymore. So the indie rock stations, the college stations. Yeah, so it took 2 weeks. It was like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
However long it takes to play a bunch of shows from Minneapolis to San Francisco.
And then
it exploded.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
We rounded around the bottom of the country, and then we came up the East Coast.
So
and then
by the time we hit Texas, our video was on 120 minutes. And then by the time we got to New York, we were talking to 15 record labels, major record labels. So it went from 3 cool dudes who, signed bands like Walt Mink and Jawbox and Uncle Tupelo, right? And it went from talking to guys like that to guys who had signed, I'm trying to think of what would be the jump.
Nickelback.
Right, right. Well, Nickelback didn't exist yet, but I think we did talk to what was Madonna's label that. What was that
with a V?
Cracker Box? What was that band called?
Oh, yeah.
Candlebox,
Candlebox.
right? That's the band,
Cracker
right?
Box.
Cracker Box, Candlebox, yeah, that kind of stuff. Where it was like you're talking to people like that. We did get to talk to. This was in LA. We got to talk to Jimmy Iovine, which was pretty neat. Got to talk to Seymour Stein, but we did wind up signing to Sire. But Seymour Stein,
Maverick. Thanks, Andy.
Yeah, Maverick.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
right. Thank you.
Seymour Stein. Oh, yeah.
Seymour Stein, who.
You guys, you know who you remind me of?
Doris, can you get me a protein shake? that was the first time I was ever in a big executive suite, and someone went on the intercom and asked his assistant for a protein shake. He got a protein shake, and then you guys remind me of the Ramones, and I was crestfallen. Because, you figure he says that to every band, right? He says one of two things to every band, and I was hoping he would say Talking Heads.
Nope.
He said Ramones. So I was like, Jimmy Iovine, I've talked about this, was like, I like this song, which is...
It was a good song.
Freedom Rock.
Yeah.
Which to me was
Wasn't
like,
that
okay, that's really
representative?
great
Yeah.
that you like the song, but that also makes me think that you're... we don't belong on Interscope.
We're not going to write more songs like that.
Right, but it's just
that
a weird
song was a joke.
Well, it's not a joke. I don't think the song was a joke. It's again that same thing. We didn't have lyrics, so it had the title Freedom Rock before it had
Because it
lyrics.
sounded like Freedom Rock. And
Yeah, so I guess that makes sense. But to me, when I listen to that song, I don't think of Bruce Springsteen. I'm trying to think of other stuff that Jimmy Iovine produced. It's like and so it's things like that where I'm just not obviously not calibrated for the music business, as if it wasn't obvious before. But it was just like, what?
Wait, so what, wasn't that the song where I don't know what Steve mixed before that, but he was like he mixed like If You See K before that, and then we went on to Freedom Rock, and he's like, oh, you know what? The settings all sound perfect. I'm just going to leave it like that. We're done with the next song.
Carvers of New York City might have been the one. So I think Freedom Rock we mixed, and then he put Carvers of New York City up, and it was like, oh, we were all like, wow, that sounds great, and we just used the same mix settings as. But yeah, no, it wouldn't have been If You See K, because If You See K on that record is actually the demo, the 8-track that we did at Steve's house. So that would have been mixed, in 10 minutes on a Sunday afternoon, which still haunts me.
Rolski.
Yeah, that song. So that's the situation where it's like, oh, that's well, it's just a situation where the song itself and how our instrumentation and it just came together, and it didn't because you listen to other songs on the record and they don't sound the same or as good, and it's just like, oh, okay, that's the one where everything was just right. And it also made me realize that there's a lot less control over. Well, there is. So the thing is if you make a bunch of songs that sound exactly the same, if you get one of them to sound perfect, then they will all sound perfect. But we're obviously not that kind of band.
This is what they were talking about in the Wind Symphony Orchestra recording meeting. Thanks, Anthony, for listening.
Is he gone? He's like,
go.
I'm leaving.
Have a great weekend.
I gotta go.
Bye.
So we're talking about us. Let's talk a little bit more about Nevermind. Yeah. So that was the big impact, was that basically there was a small group of people at major labels in the middle, or in 1991, at the beginning of 1991, there was a small group of people at major labels who would sign bands to make people at the label happy and feel like they're not complete sellouts, right? So that was part of the idea, is like, oh, now also to nurture, right? So that's one of the reasons why we signed to Sire, was because they had a history of signing bands that were weird and let them evolve over the course. And Warner Brothers in general was still like that, where it was like, oh, no, you don't have to have a hit record. And we'll just take all of Madonna's money and spend it on a bunch of weird bands and see if they stick, right? And so that was what happened. That was what was going on in early 1991 and late 1990. And then a switch was flipped in a couple of weeks in the fall of 1991, and then it was like, oh my God, we have to sign every band that wears a flannel shirt, right? Every band from a college town, right? Because before it was like, oh, well, yeah, Sonic Youth, they're great, but they're kind of they're a college band, and the Pixies, and that's the thing is, if you think about the Pixies, they were and are, right, a pop band, and yet they were not, selling a huge number of records. And so that was kind of what everyone was thinking, is like, okay, these bands all have potential, but no one's breaking out on the level like before, like a band like Talking Heads. So like, I think that was everyone's expectation with the Pixies, right? Is like major label people were like, okay, this is a weird college band, but they're poppy enough that they could move into the mainstream. And I know you're all thinking now, oh, they're mainstream and everything like that. But the reality is they did not sell. They didn't sell. They sold as, and the Replacements didn't sell a lot of records. And that's another band where it's like, oh, okay, we took, Bruce Springsteen from this cult artist, and then all of a sudden he became the world's biggest rock star, right? And it's those ideas, and they were trying to apply those templates on these bands, and they didn't work. And so that was the shock, was when Nirvana happened. It was like, oh, crap, this was the thing that was supposed to happen. Now we've got to, and then it was just a feeding frenzy. It was like, we'll throw any amount of money at anyone.
Yeah, you've been watching some what are they called, documentaries, right? Rockumentaries.
Rockumentaries.
Yeah, you want to talk to us about the ones that you've been watching?
Well, I just was kind of sleepwatching 1971. That's the year that music changed everything. Like it's an argument that music was actually influenced. It was the year that music was the most influential. It actually, had the power to change the world. So that's interesting.
So which song changed the world? Which was the song heard around the world?
They're not really talking about that, but they were talking about. And what was weird is I was just reading about the concert for Bangladesh, which is something that George Harrison put together, and that idea of like a superstar concert, that you later had like with Live Aid and everything like that. And so that type of idea that happened in 71. But it's, I don't know if it's a valid argument. It's just kind of an excuse to talk about music in 1971. But, talking about, what's his name? God, why can't I remember his name? Heard it through the grapevine. What's going on? Sexual Healing. Marvin Gaye. Just took me a while. Just had to name some songs. It's like playing the $20,000 pyramid with myself. Just like yell out things until I remember. Yeah, What's Going On by Marvin Gaye, realizing that, that was pretty revolutionary. And I think that was on Motown, right? They allowed him to do that. And so that was a sea change, because Motown up until then was a pretty, mainstream record company. And then having an artist do a political album was pretty amazing. But what other rockumentaries was I watching? Boy, I don't remember. Do you remember what I watched?
I would come in and, you were watching something, but I don't. You're always watching something. Sometimes you have to watch it with Dow, right?
Yeah.
What have you been watching with him?
The Ted Lasso. We watched Ted Lasso, which I was highly resistant because I'm not a sports guy. But and I really enjoyed the beginning of Ted Lasso, and but from a meta perspective and a binge perspective. So we watched every episode up until now. They're releasing the second season, and I really liked the relentlessly optimistic person, kind of messing with people, right? I liked that.
It sounds like something I would like to
Yeah,
watch.
you would really like it, but then the thing is I
When
don't
he
think you can
dies?
sustain that. Like to get it to become beyond a sitcom like thing and to have kind of be a dramedy, things have to get deeper. And so, and there's an after hours episode that's basically, you know, a strange night, like the Scorsese film After Hours, but which I love, you know, I love After Hours and I love seeing a reference to it, but it didn't quite feel as great as it could be. And so I didn't have a problem with the experiment. I had a problem with like it wasn't as good as After Hours, but that's a pretty high bar for me. Yeah. So not for others though, as we've discussed before.
I know. It really irks you that a film professor either hadn't seen After Hours or didn't like it. Hadn't seen it, I think it was, right?
Hadn't seen it.
Your age.
Was doing a
Scorsese,
series,
yeah.
Scorsese series, and
Yeah.
then on top of it, well, no, I told him, well, my wife says there's something wrong with me for finding this film funny, and then after he watched, he said, your wife is correct.
Oh, good.
There's something wrong with you. But yeah. And the reason why it's great, that's the thing about After Hours is great. It's not great, but basically the person who wrote it was an NYU film student and obviously was listening to Joe Frank and basically stole the whole first part of the movie from a Joe Frank episode. And so that's the thing is it's kind of, you know, once you know that and know that even though I think there was a gag order or, you know, a non-disclosure agreement or whatever the equivalent of that was in the early 1980s is he wasn't allowed to talk about it, but Joe Frank got a good amount of money for the fact that, yeah, everyone realized when the movie came out that part of it was stolen from his radio show. And so, but that Joe Frank, that kind of classic Joe Frank, not so much the Buddhist, inwardly, you know, much more Ted Lasso-y kind of worldview, you know, Joe Frank. I feel like I love the later Joe Frank stuff that's more Buddhist, but the early Joe Frank stuff is so dark and cynical and jaded, and it just, yeah, obviously sets the tone for the whole film. So, and there's original stuff in the film, but anyways, anywho.
Chad Twiner from before has written Mr. Bungle, and I like the weirdest. And then I just kind of hover over Chad Twiner's name here, and I see that we have one mutual friend in common, which is Thomas Hazelmeyer. So
interesting.
I'm not friends with you, Chad. I guess it's interesting, but I'm friends with Tom Hazelmeyer, which is also interesting. Mm-hmm. Larry is asking if we have Apple TV Plus now because The Servant is a good show to check out.
Oh yeah, we
Danny
do
Ingram
temporarily. Someone because former Bag Boy bought something, right?
Who's now Bread Boy
bought an Apple device, and so we have it. We're basically sitting on his free trial. So yeah, that's the problem. Is I can't. We need to.
Melvins, the Melvins, big Melvins fan.
Yeah.
And our friend signed the Melvins, I believe, right?
Was that Al?
Al Smith? Yeah.
Yeah, and so it was crazy, and it was great. It was a great era, right? And so that's the thing is we made a choice. We didn't go for the cash. We didn't go for the best deal. We went for the best label. And that's why we chose Sire.
Yeah.
Was because first off, basically what it went down to was we're not gonna sign to any other than the three labels that were talking to us before the Nirvana thing happened. That actually really made the decision much easier. It was still a difficult decision to make, but it was like, okay, talking to these 15 labels, but let's be realistic. We should probably go with one of the three that thought we were worthwhile before Nirvana happened. Whether or not that's actually was a good approach.
I know. I'm like,
I don't know. I think I question it somewhat. I question. So there are other, but no. I mean but there are other people we know who got much better deals, but they did not necessarily put out 3. How many records did we wind up putting out? 4 records?
Some insane amount of records. Danny
On
Ingram's
a-
asking if A&M courted us. I think
think
that's
so. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so, but it was
I
not.
think all of them did.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah.
What was Irving Azoff's label at the time? Giant. There were so many labels,
Yeah.
but it was like you'd go and you talk to people, and then it was like, okay, yeah, great,
And you
then,
get free CDs.
yeah, you'd
Yeah.
pick up a bunch of promo stuff,
Yeah.
and then yeah, but then yeah, we basically were like, okay, let's choose between these 3.
And I wrote in my book, I'm just like, this was all like just a ridiculous adventure. Because I mean, I could have been sitting and programming a computer, in a cubicle for the rest of my life, and I wasn't at this time. I was like out flying around and like being courted by major labels and getting food, getting nice meals and stuff like that. But I never thought like, oh, we're gonna be famous, I'm gonna be like a rock star on a big stage with like sparkly dresses and stuff. Never ever occurred to me at all. I was like, I hope we can still tour in this van. I want to go around the country again and see the Jolly Green Giant in Blue Earth, Minnesota.
And that was the thing about Sire is that. So yeah, Joe, who was our A&R guy, had just signed, or around the same time had signed Uncle Tupelo, so it was like, okay. And then was talking, like later on, signed Aphex Twin. So it was like obviously not just focusing on commercial viability, right? And then Howie Klein, who was the president, right, of Reprise, so that was the sort of division of Warner Brothers that handled, so Sire Reprise would put out our records, and he, had worked with the Ramones also and run, what was it, 415 Records, the new wave record label.
It was
And
very sweet to us.
loved us, loved Rose, was just always super supportive, and it would break his heart, like when we say, well, how come they're not playing our song on the radio? And, he's just like, oh, he knew, he knew why, but it was like, it's still,
And
you
to be
could tell
clear, the
he
reason-
was,
Can you explain why?
we're not,
Because Filter's song was a little bit more radio friendly than a song like called Music of America that bashes
labels,
commercial radio.
yeah, we didn't necessarily have the songs that would, be great, right, or be radio friendly.
Yeah,
We weren't working that hard on being radio friendly, let's say. And the what else? Oh yeah, and then the alternative market. There was something called the alternative marketing department, which at the time I think would make indie rockers cringe, but the reality is that basically we had a sort of indie label group within the larger label, which they dealt with all the mom and pop stores, so not the commercial chains. Yeah. They had all come from mom and pop stores. They so it was like this core group of people that worked indie bands within the larger major label. So and they were great. So it was a great experience, and for us, for a lot of other people, it was not. And the reality is we didn't get messed with, and that's the other thing that people don't realize about major label stuff is I really believe that the most common reaction within the label is indifference. And so people who talk about the label messing with them and telling them to do different types of music or change their sound and everything like that, either that's happening because they've sold records, and so people at the label care and want them to sell more records, right? And so they're messing with them. Or they've built that up in their mind that they need to change who they are to sell records, right? The artist psychs themselves out. Our experience was indifference, kind of. Not indifference. It was just kind of like, okay, this is a band that's weird, and
we got to do all kinds of computer stuff.
And they're not having a huge financial impact, and they're doing
Right.
cool things.
Yeah.
And if we had sold 100,000 or 1,000,000 records, then it would have been hell, I think.
We would have been messed with.
If we had sold nothing and had completely tried to make a commercial record that didn't sound like us and didn't make any sense,
we would have felt bad.
We would have felt
right?
bad, and we
Yeah.
would have been gone.
And that's
I think
not
also.
what we did. We stayed
Yeah.
true. We did exactly what we wanted to do, and we got
Yeah.
to put out a lot of records. And
Yeah.
then afterwards, we got to put out more. So that was really
so
cool.
that's
Benign
we're
neglect.
a bad benign
Yeah,
neglect. And
yeah.
so that's the thing is it wasn't complete neglect either, though. It was because we were able to put out a bunch of records. Typically
Mm-hmm.
it's that, you put something out, nothing happens, and what nothing means is less than 100,000 or less than 200,000 records sold, right? And then you're gone. You're
Yeah,
dropped. And that
yeah.
didn't happen with us.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't even neglect. It was exactly what we wanted.
It
is
was
we wanted
sustenance.
we wanted to be on a label that would
Yeah.
support us as we developed
Yeah.
as artists, and that worked, and we wound up being at the last label that was doing that, last major label that did that, because as you all know, if you've watched the Wilco documentary, that was happening at the same time we did our last record for Sire, or Reprise at the time. So everybody had left.
Yeah.
There was a new regime, and it was like, basically, like, unless you're Sugar Ray, that kind of artist, there's really no reason for you to be on a major label, right? And
Yeah.
and that was the expectation. So that era was over. And so we were able to coast through with the last label that was still doing that kind of stuff.
Good choice, Rick.
I guess DreamWorks for a while was that way, because the guys who ran Warner Brothers
Went to DreamWorks. Yeah.
DreamWorks Records. So they did that for a little while longer, and then it all ended.
Larry's asking, how about my book? Do I have a release date? It's done. University of Illinois Press is ready for me to deliver them the final version of it. But Rick and I are just working on the, and by Rick
It's on my to-do list, honestly.
poor Rick.
Sorry.
Rick is so much. He needs, I need him to look it over though, because I might have spelled poster children wrong, or like I made a bunch of mistakes in the earlier version, and he believes that I can. He really believes in me, right? And likes to help me when it's not as good as it could be.
I'm questioning your commitment to Sparkle Motion.
What's that?
No. I'm just I'm pushing you to you yeah. But then I kind of dropped the ball, as I haven't finished reading it, the rest of the current draft.
And what's
to
funny
push
is
it.
I haven't finished writing it either.
But I guess we should go back to Nevermind. We keep talking about ourselves, right? And
But
I
this
wanted
is
to
about
talk.
us, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it is about us.
Sugar Ray, yuck.
Yeah, exactly.
Smash Mouth.
Smash Mouth, which to me, the tragedy of Smash Mouth is, I do like those the hit songs, but I do remember they played Champagne, and they tried to play a show as a band and play those songs.
They're not really a band; they're a production.
Right.
They're a post-production.
Well, they played it as a band. They were
Yeah.
a band,
Yeah.
and then they created this really produced hit. And then when they played live, it didn't sound like that, apparently, one tour, and people hated it. And that to me was a tragedy, right? Is that they could not be a band live. Like, people, you do become a prisoner of your production or your hit, right? And so, yeah. I mean, I guess it wouldn't be a bad, a multi-million-dollar prison is much better than a regular prison, I guess, but maybe it's not. But that was, that was there are tragic elements to that. But what was I going to say about Nevermind? Yeah, it was crazy. It was a crazy time. And you got, and I think I know people like Tool of the Man, and it makes sense. That record makes sense, but it's also very contrarian. It's like, we're not going to sell out.
Yeah. I was thinking about that. I was like, we're not selling out. We're going to use Mike McMacken because he made the Codeine record. No one's ever going to buy this.
No, I don't think that's the reason. No, I think we chose him was because the Codeine record and the Bitch Magnet record sounded
fantastic,
great.
Yeah,
but also sounded good enough, like a high, like a how to say it. They had energy, and like that energy of indie rock, but sounded polished, right? That combination. And so the Butch Vig stuff, Nevermind's a little weird, because if you listen to the things like Killdozer, right, or Die Kreuzen, I think that's a more honest representation of what Butch Vig's production sounded like. And Nevermind is very Andy Wallaced. So the guy who mixed it definitely, and then that became more of the grunge sound, and then I think Butch Vig's adapted his production to sound like that. So I think in some ways, yeah, the sound that Mike McMacken had and the sound that Butch had sort of pre Nevermind was an ideal, right? It was that combination of indie rock but very polished, like a interesting mix of. Yeah, and so I think that's that. I don't think we chose Mike McMacken because of we were trying to be contrarian. I think we thought he made a couple of really great sounding records, and it was a bridge. The sound was a bridge to a more polished sound, but unfortunately, I think what we didn't realize is that it was our first major label record, but it was also his. Right?
That's right. Yeah, he was
and
freaking out.
He had.
You can't play a D sharp there. No,
yeah.
it was G
so
sharp.
yeah, it was
Yeah,
it was realizing that everyone in that era, it was like, oh,
Yeah.
and so trying to negotiate the craziness that was going on, and then realizing that other people were influenced by that craziness too. It's not just simply like, oh yeah, we're gonna make this record. It's gonna sound like this. It's like, oh no, I'm making my first major label record. It wasn't just us. So, that's where
Steve talks a little bit about having made a Nirvana record too, and how afterwards the clients dried up because either people thought he would be too expensive, or people said, well, he already made a Nirvana record. I'm not going to go with him.
Well, yeah,
or,
the perception of sort of progression of you've moved on to these larger clients, so you're not going to be making records for small fry bands, right? And so
or we don't want to jump on the Nirvana bandwagon, like we're not going to use him because Nirvana used him.
And so I don't know if I ever talked to Steve about this, but I mean, for us, the reason why we didn't make another record with Steve for 20 years, was it? How long was it? 25 years, was not because we didn't like working with Steve. It was like we wanted to try something different. And so, yeah. I mean, that for us was, and that's always in my mind, is that you shouldn't, to the fault where, and part of it was just automatic because we were burning through drummers, right? We could change things up very easily because here's a new person in the band. Okay, we're changing it up, right? That's the easiest way to do it. But it was also, don't do the same thing every time on every record. And so for us, not doing another record with Steve right after Daisy Chain was not because we didn't want to do another record with Steve. It was like we wanted to. We figured we had about.
What it looked like to record.
We figured we had 3 records in us.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, well, I'm not going to make 3 records with the same person. Whereas other people, and it might have been better if we had. I don't know. Yeah. So for me, Tula Man, I still struggle with that record because I feel like we should have re-recorded it. I don't feel like it was all the way there.
So I'm like in my 302 class, and I my computer programming class, and it's 9 a.m. and I told the kids, either you can watch these 2 20-minute videos of me and either watch 2 20-minute videos, that's 40 minutes, or come to the class 75 minutes at 9 in the morning. So this kid walks in and he goes, "This is Jody's fault," and he flashes me Junior Citizen. He's listening to Junior Citizen.
Yikes!
And I was like, "Oh, great!" I just didn't even, like years ago, I'd been horrified, like, my God, and I was just like, what do you think? Glad you're listening to Junior Citizen. Like, I like the way that Bread Boy. He's like, what do they sound like? He goes immediately either to Spotify or one of those other things, looks to see which song has the most plays, and then plays that song. And that's how he knows what a band sounds. That's how he knows what Menthol sounds like.
So I was in a Zoom call where someone played
your song, one of our songs.
Yes, and picked the song with the most plays, and that song is She Walks.
Yeah.
Which to me it's fine. Well, no, I mean it would be uncomfortable no matter what song, but I don't think it necessarily represents what our band is. But that's fine too. But it may be, yeah, it's also
What don't you
one
like
of our
about
oldest
Junior
songs.
Citizen? It's like showing somebody your pubes. I don't like I'm in class and it's like, hey, look, here's a. I don't know why it's weird.
My metaphor was it's like looking like senior high school yearbook photo, right? So and I think this is a common issue with anyone who creates something, right? And especially something that other people look at 30 years later, right? It's you I can't experience any of our music externally. I experience,
Right.
like I said, I'm just griping about.
That's why I said pubes.
Yeah, tool of the man. But for me, it's like, yeah, it's all you, like, if somebody put up a picture of you in high school and said, oh, you look really cute in high school, you're going to look at it and go, oh my God. You might say, boy, yeah, I did look cute, and now I'm really old. Or you might look at it and go, holy cow, look at that forehead. Wow. I'm glad my skin finally cleared up in my 40s. You're gonna say all sorts of really, things, and you're just gonna go through.
You're gonna be hypercritical of it, but the other thing is,
Hypercritical. You're gonna have emotions.
Yeah.
There's gonna be
Yeah.
baggage associated
Yeah.
with it, right?
Yeah.
And so there's just that's what it is. It's not, and it's in fact to the point where I would argue that anyone who creates something really has no valid opinion of it, right? You could say.
and
you
neither does anybody else. But the thing is,
I love watching documentaries, and you love hearing, and I'm like, oh, that's their favorite song. Oh, that's the greatest song they think they made, and I'm like, but I'm realizing now is like they're probably the worst person. You should never listen to the artists themselves. It's curious to find out what they think is their best song, but
well, for me, it's different. Like these songs that are recorded, to me, that's not what Poster Children is. To me, Poster Children is us playing live. That what I'm proud of is our live show. And so when somebody's like, I'm listening to your song, and they've never seen us play live, to me, that's like you're looking at my pubes instead of my face.
All right then. Okay, we got to end it here. We got to pick up a kid.
Is the title of this one going to be Pubes?
No.
Okay. What's your greatest song? Quite obviously, it's